Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on the channel today. And I have to say that I don't know that I've ever been more really excited to do a presentation because we're going to concentrate today on something that I've wanted to concentrate on for over a year. And that is the question of, is Prayer Man the person who's seen in several films, several 8 millimeter films taken on the day of the assassination, that figure standing right in front on the steps of the Texas School Book Depository? Is that Lee Oswald? Is that Lee Oswald actually holding a Coke, just like he said that he did? Said he bought a Coke. Well, we're going to examine that today, and we're going to examine it in quite a bit of detail. And I think that you may be surprised that the answer to that question really might be yes, even to a degree more than perhaps you've thought in the past. But more than that, I'm going to tell you why I think we're going to find out who that person is in the photo, whether it's Lee Oswald or not. And that's all going to come down to something that looks, in my opinion, just like this. Okay? What this is a 3/4 inch, or another word for it was U-matic, a 3/4 inch or U-matic videotape. Okay, and I'll just pull it out, and this is the actual cassette that is the 3/4 inch tape. The tape is in there, and it's 3/4 inch, reminiscent of the smaller VHS or Betamax tapes that a lot of you may have grown up using. Well, why do I say that that may be a key to finding out who Badge Man is? Well, it's because the original films that NBC holds, they put out on, they released onto videotape, which is U-matic, 3/4 inch. That's about the worst kind of image that you could use for putting out something from film. I grew up using these 3/4 inch pneumatic tapes after grad school and starting in as a video producer at TV stations and then on my own. Originally, we were using these 3/4 inch videotapes, and let me tell you, the resolution is exceedingly bad. Only 240 lines of resolution. Okay, that's compared to the 1920 by 1080 resolution that we have now with high definition. So, what's that? 5, 4, 8, at least 9 times worse than what we would be seeing in high definition. And then the question becomes, well, wait a minute. Why was the image put on a videotape like this to be released to the public and then not ever updated throughout the history of videotape and visual images? In other words, after this, U-matic came a better form of U-matic called U-matic SP, or Special Performance, and then came formats like Betacam and Betacam SP, not the Beta Max that you're thinking of, and then tapes like 1 inch tape, and then that was all before we went digital, of course, in the early 90s. All right, so you have to ask yourself the question, and we're going to get into it in just a bit, of why hasn't NBC, who holds the rights to these films, why haven't they ever changed the format, taken the original films, blown each frame up, and put now onto high definition digital? The problem with this is that it's an analog format. Every time you make a copy of the copy, it degrades incredibly. It's analog, so we're using luminance and chrominance, the black and white and the color signal, and it just degrades so much. And I think that may be one reason why NBC has never updated the original film, the stills from that film, to a digital format. Is it because maybe they don't want us to actually see who Prayer Man actually is? Because I can guarantee you that we're going to be able, if you take those original films, the Weigman film and the others, and you digitize them, each of the frames to an HD format or a 4K format, even better, of course, we're going to be able to see who that person is, whether it's Lee Oswald or not. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. One of the main authors and researchers that we have to immensely thank for this Prayer Man story moving forward is author Bart Camp. And his book, Prayer Man More Than a Fuzzy Picture, really pushes the narrative further. And what we have here, guys, is we have two films that are both under the control of NBC, and that's the Weigman film and the Darnell film. And both of those films, as I mentioned to you, were originally released on Umatic videotape. Now, we're going to show you from Bart Camp's presentation some stills here and show you what he and other researchers that I don't want to give short shrift to. There's been a lot of folks that have worked on this story. So thank you to all of you guys. And let's look at some stills from the Weigman and the Darnell film. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how maybe we can start narrowing down exactly who this unidentified person is. Okay, now it becomes fairly easy to view an unidentified man in the corner of the steps on the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository, and he's standing about one step down from the top. His arms seem to be in an almost praying motion, and it was from this image on the Darnell film that this person is now called the Prayer Man. But one of the ways that it's easy to get a little bit mixed up is that if we happen to look at the Weigman film, you'll notice that a person that looks to be, close to where that other person was is actually Bill Lovelady, who is identified in this shot. Now, these are two different time periods here, okay? So that is Bill Lovelady. But if we go back to the other shot, we see that the person that, is in the corner of the film is certainly not Bill Lovelady. And that's the person who may well be Lee Harvey Oswald. And of course, on this shot, we've now zoomed in on the Weigman film that it looks totally black in that area when you're looking at the original. But when you zoom in and do an enhancement, it does seem like there's a person there that could be Lee Oswald. And again, push that a little bit further. If you look at this image that appears in Bart Camp's Prayer Man book, you'll notice that sitting on the stoop there is not only what appears to be a Coke bottle, but also a lunch bag. And that's pretty amazing. Let's look at one more still frame here of the people that are some people that are photographed later. And if you look right at it'll be the left as we're looking at it, the shoulder of the lady in the foreground, that very well could again be the Coke bottle that was left there by Lee Oswald. So Bart Camp just does an amazing job in his book of delineating the images that we see and talking about the exact timing during the Darnell film and the Weigman film that the still images are taken from. So we'll leave that, of course, to him who's done so much work on it. But let's talk now about a couple of ways that we can, begin to understand a little more about if that person is Lee Oswald, Prayer Man. And one of the ways that we can do that is to look at the research that Camp and many others have done over the years, and we can start to kind of narrow down who it could be. And remember, we know who all of the employees were that Friday, November 22nd at the Texas School Book Depository. So that's such a good starting point. And the fact is that there is no employee of that was working that day that can be identified as that person in the Weigman or especially the Darnell film that would look like the person that we saw on the steps of the book deposit there, book depository there. Okay. So we know the person that he looked the most like, of course, was Billy Lovelady, but we can separate Lovelady so we know exactly where he was. So we know that either that was Lee Oswald or it wasn't anyone else that was working in the Texas School Book Depository. So then we have to go to number two, of course. Well, could it have been a stranger? And the answer to that is, of course, we don't know. Could a stranger have walked up there? It's possible, sure. But is it likely? Not very likely at all, because everybody else that's around those steps there can be identified. And they were, for the most part, all employees of the school book depository. And why would someone kind of walk up there? Because that wouldn't be a really good view of the motorcade. It'd be a good view of the motorcade as it was coming down Houston, but not after it turned on Elm Street, which is really what most people would want to see after it turned to Elm Street and then headed down towards Dealey Plaza, right? So, that's another reason that we can be really, really optimistic that that person may very well be Lee Oswald. Now, what's really interesting is that if we look at the notes of Dallas Police Captain Bill Fritz and also of James Hosty, the FBI agent, both who were present during the questioning of Lee Oswald, we see that Oswald stated he was present for work in the Texas School Book Depository the morning at 8 o'clock, the morning of November 22nd. And at noon, he went to lunch. He says he went to the second floor to get a Coke to drink with lunch and returned to the first floor to eat lunch. Then he went to watch the presidential parade. And Lee Oswald said he went outside to watch the presidential parade, stood next to Bill Shelley. And that's exactly where the Weigman and Darnell films have him if Prayer Man is indeed Lee Oswald. The other thing that we really have to question is the either the accuracy or the truth of building superintendent Roy Truly. And the reason I say this is that in his initial conversations and statements on the day of the assassination, he really didn't delineate having any kind of an encounter with Lee Oswald, with the police officer in the lunchroom. It was only on his statement of the 25th that that came into play. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that the more time that seems to go by between the assassination day and when the statements are actually put out, it seems the more, well, we'll just say inaccuracies appear on those statements. I don't want to get too deeply into Roy Truly's statements because it is covered well in Bart Camp's book, and also it gets a little bit complicated. We really don't have time for the details in this particular video, but I do encourage you to read Camp's book. So now the logical thing that we need to go to now, of course, is why isn't NBC releasing the better copies of the Weigman film and the Darnell film? Why aren't they allowing the original 8 millimeter films to be digitized to high definition and for everyone in the world to be able to see all the new information that will become available? And the question has to be, are they not releasing it on purpose? And is it because they know that prayer man is Lee Oswald? Well, here's a copy of the request from the Luna Commission to NBC way back in April requesting release of the films. Now, the great thing is that we really have a shot, a really good shot to make a gigantic jump in what we know about the JFK assassination. Because if the new film scans do show that that is Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the doorway of the school book depository, then we know he has had nothing to do with the assassination of President Kennedy. And so we can really start moving on to identifying all those in the CIA, the Secret Service, James Rowley in particular, and all of the conspirators who we really should be looking at rather than Oswald. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.